The grass is always greener. Chapter 11. The city was in chaos. Not that was anything new. The city seemed to be in chaos a lot recently. Still, Serpentine were attacking the TV station, and that was not a good thing. But that still begged one question. Why attack the TV station? Asked Cole as the Bounty flew as fast as it could to their destination. They were watching live footage of the attack on the monitor so that they knew what they would be in for. It doesn't really make sense. Got that right, said Kai. Can't really do anything to sabotage us from there. I'm not sure if Garmadon even has a TV, said Jay. Living underground with snakes and skeletons doesn't really give the best reception. Lloyd had been studying the video feed with a critical eye. He wants to talk, he said with certainty. Everyone else turned to look at him. How do you know? Asked Zane. My dad used to do this too whenever he had some leverage that he thought could let him make demands, Lloyd explained. He'd attack some public place that would get a lot of attention, and only that place, making as big a stink as he could to get us to come running. The TV station was a favorite because it has a built-in way of getting as much attention as possible. The others examined the footage and the reports of what was happening. Yep, that's definitely what he's doing now, said Nia. On the right side, it means you probably won't hurt anyone, Lloyd added. He wants as much attention as possible, and you need people running and screaming in order to do that. Sensei Wu looked at him with interest. You seem remarkably insightful of my brother's schemes, he said. You can only fight a guy so many times before you get inside his head, Lloyd muttered ruefully. Let's just hope this is one thing your dad has in common with Garmadon, said Cole. Lloyd nodded, and he and Cole both turned to the rest of the ninja and said in unison, Be careful, this could still be a trap. The second they realized there was an echo, they both turned and stared at each other in surprise. Did you two plan that? Kai couldn't help but ask. No, said Lloyd. Cole raised an eyebrow but shrugged it off. Great minds think alike, I guess. Well, that counts you out, Dirtclawed, Jay teased. Very funny, said Cole with a mock glare before turning serious. Look, if Garmadon wants to talk, we know it'll be with Lloyd. And since that's what we were going for anyway, I say we go along with it. But when things start going south, be ready to fight back. Also, Nia, we need you to be our eyes in the sky for any backstabbing. The rest of them nodded in acknowledgement, and something finally clicked in Lloyd's head. Kids don't lead ninja teams. It hadn't occurred to him before now, though it really should have. But with the ninja here describing his counterpart as a small child, it was highly unlikely that he was the leader of this team. And while Nia was next in charge in this world, she vehemently was not a ninja in this one, making her being the leader here unlikely as well. It never came to mind to question who was in charge if that were the case. Though, as far as leaders went, he figured Cole was a good choice. While this one seemed more strategic and open than the one he was used to, if he had the same sturdy dependability of his Cole, then he would make a strong leader in his own right. His Cole had simply never been interested in such a thing, and there had never been a situation where they needed him to step up. It was something to consider for the future, but now he needed to focus on the mission. If this didn't work, getting him and the other Lloyd switched back would become a whole lot harder. Hopefully, his older dad would see it that way, too. It quickly became clear that Lloyd had been right about Garmadon wanting to talk. That, or this was a very poorly disguised trap. Upon arriving at the station, the Serpentine, who had been making a ruckus outside the building, immediately turned to run inside. But they didn't run as fast as the ninja knew the snakes could go. Instead, they were very deliberately attempting to lead them all in different directions. At Cole's behest, none of them went off alone, instead splitting into groups of 2 and 3. Lloyd found himself with Zane, running through the upper levels of the studio, chasing a Serpentine, carrying something that sounded like a very fake baby in his arms. It couldn't be more obvious if they tried. Finally, the Serpentine ducked into a room at the end of the hall, and the 2 ninjas pulled to a stop in front of it. This is it, said Zane. I sense Garmadon is close by. I wouldn't bet against it, Lloyd agreed. He then glanced over at the Nindroid. Listen, when I talk to Garmadon, I might say some things you won't like. Zane studied him, his expression betraying nothing. How so? He said evenly. If it comes down to it, I'm going to threaten him, said Lloyd, rubbing his right arm unconsciously. But it's a threat you probably won't like either. Just know I have no intention of going through with it, but you'll need to play along. Zane remained stoic, but nodded. Lloyd didn't fail to note that the nod was simply the acknowledgement, not agreement. Man, did this Zane have better poker face than his own. Swallowing down any indecision, Lloyd shoved the door open and the 2 stepped inside. It was nice to see both this Garmadon and his father shared a similar flair for the dramatics. It looked like the room's regular use was as a set for some fantasy show. The walls were made to look like the great hall of Grand Castle, complete with an ornate throne at the end of it. And guess who was lounging in said throne? The mega-weapon held lazily in his hand. "Lord Garmadon," said Lloyd in a greeting that was just on the edge of polite. Zane, meanwhile, dodged an attempted sneak attack from the serpentine they'd followed to get here, and a scuffle started in the background. Lloyd Garmadon studied Lloyd up and down, his face cold and stern before it melted into disappointment. "You are still adamant I am not the father you know?" he asked. "I had hoped spending time with the ninja would have cleared your head. Unless they led you astray intentionally." He sent a suspicious glare at Zane, who was in the process of pinning the serpentine to the wall with his shurikens. The Dark Lord then tightened his grip on the mega-weapon threateningly. Lloyd stepped forward deliberately, both to block his view of Zane and to seem less threatening. "We did clear things up, but not in the way you seem to think," he said, holding up his hands to show he had no intention of fighting. "Oh?" said Garmadon, his glowing red eyes resting upon the Green Ninja once again. Lloyd took a deep breath to steady himself. "My name is Lloyd Garmadon," he said. "I'm 16, and my whole life I've lived in Ninjago City with my mother, where I'm a student at Ninjago High." He saw Garmadon's eyes widen at the inconsistency between his life and his counterparts, but he continued regardless. "For the last few years, I've been the leader of the Secret Ninja Force, a team created by my Uncle Wu to stop my father, Lord Garmadon, from conquering the city and then all of Ninjago. We finally stopped him for good and made peace a few months ago. I was actually visiting him when I suddenly found myself here in this world." Lord Garmadon stared at him as comprehension slowly dawned on him. "A world where we didn't have to fight each other," he said, looking at his new weapon with new understanding. "You were brought here from another realm. And your son, this world's Lloyd Garmadon, is likely back in mine," Lloyd continued with a nod. He then stood tall as he made his demand. "That is why we need you to agree to a ceasefire effective immediately." That got Garmadon's attention focused solely on him. "And why would I ever agree to that?" he asked. "Because I'm the only way you'll ever see your son again," Lloyd said bluntly. "If looks could kill, Lloyd would be a stain on the ground right now." "Is that a threat?" demanded Garmadon, looking like he wanted to use the mega-weapon on him now. Lloyd quickly shook his head. "No, it's the simple truth," he said firmly. "I'm the only one in this Ninjago that knows which world your son is in. But the ninja and I can't, in good conscience, leave this world undefended long enough to go get him. Not with your constant threat on the horizon." Garmadon's glare didn't lessen. "And were I to simply use the mega-weapon to bring my son back to me?" he asked. Lloyd eyed the weapon warily. "You could try, but would that really be him?" he asked. "We've established he's not the only Lloyd Garmadon out there, and from what I've heard about your mega-weapon, it hasn't really worked out for you so far, has it?" Garmadon bristled, but couldn't deny it. "Also, we do not trust you," said Zane, who it seems can help but throw in his 2 cents as well as he walked to stand beside Lloyd, having finished his fight. "And if I refuse?" asked Garmadon testily. "If I were to lie and conquer this world while you were away fetching my son?" At that, Garmadon looked him dead in the eye. "I've always wanted a little brother," he said casually. Garmadon froze, and Zane's head whipped around to stare at him in shock. Lloyd shot the ice ninja a look that he hoped conveyed that this was where he needed to play along. "If you don't do this," Lloyd said slowly, his face impassive, "then I'll be forced to assume he'll be safer staying in my world. A world conquered by evil is no place for a child to grow up. He would already have a family who'd want him there, and my father, unlike you, has sworn off evil. Our world is safe, and he'd be happy there. And yes, that is a threat." Zane stared at him for a long moment. "It does sound like the perfect place to train him without interruptions," he conceded slowly, though only Lloyd could tell he wasn't being sincere. "The other ninja and I would not need to worry for his safety as we took Ninjago back." "You'd steal my son from me?" Garmadon shouted. "Do you even care?" Lloyd snapped back, glaring at him. "You're evil! What's one kid when you have the opportunity to conquer all of Ninjago?" Lloyd Garmadon was seething. "I admit to my own faults," he said in a bitingly dangerous tone. "The evil that runs through my veins may be strong, but do not ever accuse me of not caring for my son." Lloyd blinked at the comment, but he couldn't help but feel something inside him soften into a bittersweet sentiment at those words. At least the Lloyd here hadn't had to grow up thinking his own father didn't love him. "I'm glad to hear that," he said with such honesty that took both Garmadon and Zane aback. "Will you agree to the ceasefire so that we can get him?" Garmadon looked like he was literally at war with himself over the prospect before saying, "Very well, a truce. I will not attack Ninjago while you and the ninja fetch my son so that he can return and fulfill his destiny." He then waved his hand in clear dismissal. Zane's expression brightened and he turned to walk away, but Lloyd hesitated, confused. "What destiny?" he asked slowly. Zane stopped short, and Garmadon looked a lot like Lloyd's dad's sharks did when they smelled blood in the water. "The ninja didn't tell you of the prophecy of the Green Ninja?" he asked, a slow smirk spreading across the evil lord's face. Lloyd's bewildered look was answer enough. Zane sighed and turned to face them both. "It was not our intention to keep it from you," he said honestly. "We had assumed such a thing was the same in both our worlds. It wasn't until training earlier we realized we were wrong." "One ninja will rise above the other and become the Green Ninja. The ninja destined to defeat the Dark Lord," Garmadon quoted with a sneer. "I was there when destiny itself confirmed my son was the Green Ninja, the one chosen to defeat me." Lloyd stared at them. "You expect him to fight you?" he demanded. "He's just a kid. I didn't even start fighting until I was twice his age." "It is not a choice any of us made willingly," Garmadon replied, clear regret in his voice. "But it is what destiny has demanded." "Destiny can kiss my cat's litter box," Lloyd said, looking like he might be considering keeping his counterpart after all. "You can't let a kid grow up with that hanging over his head." "We don't like it either, but what choice do we have?" asked Zane helplessly. Garmadon has tried repeatedly to stop Lloyd from achieving this, but all he has done thus far is make Lloyd stronger. We want to protect him and would rather it be any of us instead, but no matter what any of us do, it always comes back to being his fate. Lloyd glared at the floor, his mind racing, trying to find a solution for all of this. His own life sucked enough. He couldn't let another version of him go through something potentially worse, especially not a little kid. Finally, he said, "I'll do it." Zane and Garmadon stared at him in shock, unsure if they'd heard him correctly. "What?" asked Zane. "I said I'll do it," Lloyd said, turning to face Garmadon with a determined glare. "If destiny wants Lloyd Garmadon to fight you so bad, then I'll fight you in his place. There's more than one Green Ninja." Garmadon stared at him before shaking his head in laughter. "Even from another world, you are my son. No doubts about that," he said fondly, before remembering previous times his own son had stood defiantly before him with the same expression on his face. "Very well, Green Ninja. Go and return my son to me." Lloyd nodded resolutely and turned his heel to march out the door, Zane trailing behind, still boggled by what he just witnessed. As Lloyd reached the door, he paused. "You know, there was a prophecy in my world that got completed recently," he said slowly. "It wasn't about me, but one thing we all learned from it was that there are parts of prophecies that can apply to anyone." Lloyd turned to look over at his alternate father and continued. "The Green Ninja's identity may be set in stone, but I didn't hear your name in it." Garmadon was staring at him once again. "If I am not the Lord in the prophecy, then who?" he asked. "If it could truly apply to anyone, how could it not apply to me?" Lloyd shrugged. "There will always be more Dark Lords, and as for making sure it's not you, well, maybe changing your title could help. Can't be you if you're not a Dark Lord. Count Garmadon has a more threatening ring to it anyway." With that, he left the room with Zane, leaving Garmadon laughing behind him. In the Cloud Kingdom, a scribe stared at the scroll before him, unable to decide if he should be fascinated or horrified. Both were good. He quickly rolled up the scroll and stashed it away where it could not easily be seen by the others, and prayed for the best. Nothing will come of it, he told himself. Centuries of prophecy and planning can't be derailed by the words of one teenage boy. Or at least, he hoped not.